Julie. This is, let me see, you have 3 different names. And I think today you're here as Julie Henry.
I am here as Julia Henry. I have 3 different JH names for a lot of reasons that have to do with the publishing world. But I've written a series as Julianne Holmes, the Clock Shop series. I've written a Theater Cop series as J.A. Hennrikus, and now I write the Garden Squad series as Julia Henry.
And the new Garden Squad mystery is just out, is that right?
Just out. It's the 3rd book in the series, Digging Up the Remains, and it's fresh off the press. This is from the brand new box I just got. It came out on Tuesday, August 25th.
From from that publisher?
Oh, from Kensington. So I've also, the reason I have 3 different JH names is I've had 3 different publishers, but Kensington does a really wonderful job supporting cozies, and this is a cozy series. So I'm thrilled that the Garden Squad all found a home with Kensington.
Yeah, Kensington's lovely for cozies.
Really lovely for cozies, and thinking of new ways to help us promote and to find a home, and during COVID trying to have virtual things set up for us. So I'm very happy there.
So that's your advice for authors during the pandemic. What are new ways to promote? What have you tried, and what are you thinking about trying?
Well, it's such an interesting question, Sarah, because you and I have also been talking about being a writer during COVID, which should be easy because you're not leaving, but it can be, it's hard to get always in the groove. But for for promoting, I'm finding that doing videos, getting out there, being on social media, giving people access. So, I did a Facebook Live on my launch day. I always find promoting with other authors to be so much easier and more fun. And so Kensington publishes a lot of cozies, and 8 of us who were released on Tuesday are doing a book hop, and that's fun. I also think that celebrating other people's books coming out makes it easier, so that you're not always saying, buy my book, buy my book. You're also saying, and here's another one. And so just keeping that energy up and letting people know that it's out and it's available. And as JH Authors, I'm on Facebook and I'm on Instagram, and happy to talk to folks. I'm also working on, and I don't know if you've had success with this, but I'd love if people have book groups they want me to come into or anything. I'm very happy to meet with folks on Zoom. So, it's meeting readers. That's the hardest part about this is, when you do a live event in a library or bookstore and you've got some people there, it's so nice to just be able to read the room and to talk to people. And you can't do that on Zoom as easily, but I'm getting good at that too.
And are you part of the blog group as well?
I am. I'm one of 6 women who blog with the Wicked Authors, and that has been one of the best things that I could have done as a author. When we started, I think within the group there were 2 books out, and everyone had signed a contract. I hadn't even gotten a contract yet, but they invited me to be part of the blog. And now we've been together for 7 years, and I think we're in the 40s as the number of books that we've all published. Wow. And different names and all this, and it's, as you know, this publishing journey has a lot of twists and turns and things you don't expect, and having other writers who you can ask questions of, or you could just say, this just happened, or find, my friend Barbara Ross got a BookBub alert that my book was out on Tuesday, so she sent it to me. And it's just those little moments that people are so kind and so supportive, and it just makes it so much more fun. So I always recommend people find their community, but the Wicked authors. And we have people on, you've been on the blog, you know,
Oh,
we have
yes.
visitors, and it's our readers of the blog are incredibly generous and really love the types of books we're promoting. And, you know, it's a great community we've built.
Mhm. So JH authors and Wicked authors. Tell, tell us something about the book.
So when I started the Garden Squad series, I had been talking to my agent about, you know, what kind of book. And he said, you know, gardening is kind of a hot topic. So I was mulling that over, and all of a sudden, this character came to mind, or not really all of a sudden, it took me a while, but, and her name is Lily Jane, and she's a 65-year-old recent widow. And you know, was so sad after her husband passed that both she and her gardens sort of laid to, you know, went to ground for a couple of years. But she's a master gardener. She lives in this big oversized house in the South Shore of Massachusetts, and she has friends. And when she started to feel better, she started to look around, realize that there were gardening issues in her small town that the town wasn't taking care of. She's lived there her whole life, and she's, you know, she just doesn't wait for permission. She just does so. So she started to go around and solve the gardening problems. And then she started with her friends solving some crimes as well. And so the series has been, the first book took place in May, early June. Second book that was Pruning the Dead. The second book, Tilling the Truth, took place in August. And then this book, Digging Up the Remains, takes place the week before Halloween, going through Halloween. So, you know, in book world, it hasn't been that long.
Tilling the Truth is a wonderful title, by the way, and a wonderful book. So would you read us a little bit?
I'd be happy to read you a little bit. I hope I don't flash too much. So in Digging Up the Remains, so Lily, the town that I based Goosebush on is Duxbury, Massachusetts. So I changed the geography, and it's not exactly, but I lived in Duxbury from 1st to 8th grade, so I remember it well. And in a small town like that, everybody knows everybody's business. But being a New England town, people don't want to share their secrets, right? You know everybody's, but it's secrets, but it sort of becomes a collected agreement that we're not going to talk about things. And so in Digging Up the Remains, there's a reporter who's come to town because there have been 2 murders in the last 6 months. And he starts digging into the stories and digging into people's pasts. His name is Tyler Crane. And Lily, he tries to blackmail her. He threatens to tell a secret that he won't tell her exactly what it was, but he tells her enough that she knows that he knows something. But he misunderstood who she is because she doesn't care. She's just sort of thinking, what else does he know that he's going to do anything with? And I am grateful that somebody like Tyler Crane popped into my head because he makes an excellent victim. So in this part of the book, she's already had her run-in with Tyler. She's gone back to her house, which is a big, rambling Victorian on a triple lot. It's set back, and her entire backyard are her gardens, her beloved gardens. And whenever, she also has a big greenhouse back there. Whenever she gets upset, she just goes out into the gardens. Her housemate's name is Delia. Delia is 40 years younger than she was. She was her late husband's graduate assistant. And she moved into the house to help take care of Alan and to help him finish his last book. And then she stayed. And so she and Delia, she and Lily are very, very good friends. And much, you know, they're very different, but Delia's part of the Garden Squad, as is Ernie, who owns Bits, Bolts, and Bulbs, which is a hardware store in town, and Tamara O'Connor, Lily's best friend from when she was 3. So that's the original Garden Squad. But let me read you a chapter. When Lily got home, she called Delia, but her housemate wasn't there, or she didn't hear Lily. Windward, the Jane family house, was enormous. It had been built on a triple lot by a persnickety ship captain who eschewed all of the unwritten ordinances of Goosebush. Most houses were Federalist style. His house was a rambling Victorian. Most houses had small front yards. His house was set quite a ways back. Few houses had fences or gates. He made sure his house was surrounded by a tall stone fence on 3 sides and a wrought iron gate at the head of the driveway. The house had stayed in the family for generations, but it had fallen into disrepair during the first half of the last century when the family fortune had dipped. Lily was forever grateful that her grandparents had held on and that it was passed on to her father, who passed it on to her. The success she had had in her business life ensured that the house had never been as well maintained. As much as Lily wanted to go upstairs and take a short nap and shower before she went out to dinner with her friends, she needed to see her gardens first. She walked down the center hallway of the house, casually looking into the living room on the left, the dining room on the right, past the kitchen and the breakfast room towards the 3-season porch that ran along the back of the house. She walked through the French doors and closed them behind her. She and Delia had taken out all of the screens and put in the storm windows at the beginning of October with the help of the students on the beautification committee. She'd paid each of them and invited them over to a cookout as a thank you. Delia told her that the cookout was enough thanks, but Lily did not take lightly the help that the students gave the beautification committee, and she suspected a few of them could use the extra cash. Delia and Lily could and would continue to sit out in the porch for as long as possible, which, thanks to space heaters, was well into November. She stepped out into the porch and looked around. Delia wasn't there either. Perhaps she was in the greenhouse? Lily looked over to her left at the door at the end of the porch that led to her gardening sanctuary. Lily's greenhouse was not a glass box. Though the structure was 30 years old, she built in the style of a grand Victorian greenhouses and butted it up against the stone wall, blocking egress from the front yard to the back. Lily liked it that way. The ornate decorative ironwork was designed to go with the house. Inside there were all the modern conveniences Lily could ever want, but the large room still had an old-fashioned air. She loved her greenhouse and had installed solar panels so it was tempered all year long. She paused but decided not to go in there. The room had a time vortex for Lily. Whenever she walked in, no matter what the reason, she emerged hours later, eyes glazed and hands dirty. She stepped to the edge of the porch and opened the door to her backyard. Brisk fall gardening would keep her on task. Backyard was an inadequate term for the back of Lily's house. When you walked down from the front porch, you were officially in Lily's gardens. Winding paths, flower beds that varied throughout the seasons, artwork strategically placed throughout, seating areas, a dining area on the patio. To some, the garden seemed haphazard, but for Lily and her friends who understood, it was an homage to the wonderful parts of Lily's life. The statue in the koi pond, a gift to her from Alan, her late husband. She hadn't loved the piece when he gave it to her, but now it made her smile because it reminded her of him. She walked past the statue of a saint, and as was her habit, bent down to pull the weeds or pinch back plants that needed it. She looked at the rose bushes her father had planted those many years ago and was thrilled at how healthy they looked. She and Delia would be preparing the bushes for the winter, but not for a couple of more weeks. Lily made a mental note to order more materials to build fences around them. According to the almanac, there'd be a lot of heavy snow this winter, so she wanted to make sure they survived. Lily turned to her left and saw the meditation bench that Delia had placed in her section of the garden. Maybe that was where the poison plant garden would go next year. Typical Delia, the kindest, most gentle person Lily had never known, planning a poison garden with the glee that most people reserve for the night before Christmas. Lily took a few more steps to the back of the garden, her private section. She saw the 3 statues dispersed throughout a mixture of seagrasses, short shrubs, and annuals that had receded. While the rest of the garden had mulch, the section had tumbled seashells and stones strewn throughout it. Lily paused and looked at each statue carefully. On the one on the left, the angel with a basket of flowers. The one in the middle, an artist's palette carved out of marble. The one on the right, the broken bust of an ancient Greek. Lily futzed in the seashell garden as she called it for a few more minutes, though it was pristine. She stepped back and wiped a tear from her eyes. Well, my darlings, it seems as if we're going to be in the news on Saturday. Lily, are you out there? She heard Delia call her. Coming, Lily called. She put her hands to her lips and blew a kiss at each statue. She walked out the path the other way and stopped by the compost bin to pull the weeds and bits and pieces she'd put in. Lily was still dressed as she'd been earlier, with bits of leaves stuck to her fleece jacket and in her hair. Did you just get back? Delia asked. I did. I stopped by the Star and ran into that reprehensible Tyler Crane. Well, that's a good word for him. I've heard other words lately, stronger words. Lily looked at her young friend. What's the matter, Delia? Oh, Lily, I know you warned me. You told me not to. I don't know what to do. Lily walked over to Delia and took her gently by the elbow, turning her back toward the house. Let's go in and have a cup of tea, and you can tell me what's bothering you. I'm sure we can figure it out. Delia took Lily's hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. I don't know, Lily. I've opened a huge can of worms.
Oh, it makes me want to rush right out and garden.
Well, it's I love imagining and doing the gardens and talking about them. I will confess, I live in an apartment, so I don't garden, and I can't even keep my philodendron alive at this point. So I'm not sure what's going on. But my youngest sister is a huge gardener, so she helps me, and she's Lily in that she deals with winter, but she lives for that moment when she can go out and just start cleaning off her garden beds and plant again. And she stays out there for as long as possible. So it's a lot of fun to think about.
And that greenhouse. I rent that greenhouse.
Well, the nice thing about writing cozies is, and especially the cozies I write, there are some cozies that are very built in reality, but mine are very heightened reality. So this idea of this glorious house with all these rooms in this, bird cage, iron greenhouse that's a sanctuary out in the back, and these, huge lot and the ocean views. It's my dream as well. So I love the idea of it for sure.
So I know that Lily is an older heroine, and frequently cozies are about romance. Is there romance in the offing for her?
Well, in the first book, Sarah, I don't know if this happens to you, but I will start writing something and then a character comes in who I think is just going to be there for a second, ends up to be a major character. But I have somebody moving in next door, and there's a garden gate in between her house and the next door house, because her house was built with a sea captain, a relative, and he built the house next door for his daughter. But family legend has it that they had an argument and locked the gate and both threw away the key. So it hasn't been open in over 100 years. And Lily hasn't much cared because she didn't like the next door neighbors, and they would let vines creep over her wall, and she wasn't unhappy. But in Pruning the Dead, the new neighbor moves in, and he's her age, maybe even a couple of years older, English. When I write him, I think of Timothy Dalton, and he's been married 3 times, divorced 3 times, sort of, is this man about town who is so thrilled that he's finally retired and can live his dream, which is owning a house and gardening, but he has no idea what he's doing. So he comes to Lily a lot, and they've got a friendship for sure. And, she's been married twice. Her first husband left her for another woman, which Lily thinks is one of the most fortunate things that ever happened to her, because she would have stayed married to him and not met Alan, who was the love of her life. But I think that Roddy and Lily may, I have readers who ask about it. They may move into more than friendship, but I don't want to rush it. When I hope that this is a long series. And I know that if you rush things too fast, then, you have like who moves in where and all that kind of stuff. So I'm enjoying exploring that for her, for sure. Yeah. Cozies always have romance, or not always, but that's usually part of it. The amateur sleuth, the disorder that gets fixed in the book. I've got all those elements in it. We don't usually have older protagonists, but I'm really enjoying Lily's being of an age so that I can, I know what it's like to bend down too long and have your knees hurt when you get up. And I like that Lily knows that too, and she has to sort of swivel her hips after she's been gardening for too long because she's stiff. And, she can't run fast. She might want to, but she will, even when something terrible is happening, it takes her a while to get there. But I also love that she knows enough about the world, and she's been around for a long time, and she doesn't judge things easily, because she brings all of her, she's generous in how she estimates what's going on. So she does expect the best, but also you don't cross her. She's tough. She's tough.
Let me bring up something that we were talking about earlier. As an experienced writer, you were one of the people who was published by Midnight Inc., which very abruptly decided that it was no longer publishing mysteries.
Yeah.
Tell me about your experience with that. How did you feel? What did you do about it? If you don't mind.
No, I don't mind at all. It's interesting because I teach some writing courses, and I talk to people about their creative journey in a lot of different ways. I teach business classes for artists as well. So I talk about the creative journey a lot. And being a writer and being a published author are two different parts of the journey. So being a writer is the writing, it's the research, it's the sitting down, it's the mechanics of putting the book together, and it's getting it out into the world. The published author takes over, when the book is published, and a little bit before, promoting and doing all the rest of that. And so my writing journey has been, I've been getting better and I've been doing things, but my agent told me when I had my first book published, which was 5 years ago, he said, "We've got you published, now we have to keep you published." And I had no idea what he meant. Cut to. My first series was with Berkeley Prime Crime as Julianne Holmes, and it was 3 books, and it's the series, it was when Cozy's, there was a lot of tumult, so it stayed at 3. And then Midnight Inc. it was actually the first books I was trying to sell. So they were the first books that I felt were going to be good. So they're not as cozy, they're more traditional mysteries. And they were a wonderful imprint that had just, made beautiful covers and took good care and everything. And then I'll never forget,
I miss them.
Yes, no, wonderful, wonderful series. And I was in the middle of a meeting and my phone jiggled and somebody texted me and said, "Sorry about Midnight Inc." I'm like, "What about Midnight Inc.?" And that was the first I'd heard. I hadn't heard beforehand, but they decided to close the mystery imprint. So it took a while for it to close. But this last May, I got the rights back to both of my books. I'd gotten the rights back for the first one, but I got the rights back for the second one. So in publishing, it depends on what your contracts are like. There's so many different contracts, but my first series, for example, was a right for hire. So Julianne Hennrikus, and that series is owned by Berkeley. So somebody else could pick it up at some point. So I can't publish those. But when I got my rights back for Midnight Ink, that means that I could make a decision. And there are a couple of imprints that are coming that have been established to help people with what they call orphan series, so that they'll, you know, republish the old ones, and then if you have a new one, they'll publish it with you. But I've decided that I'm going to self-publish these two books, so I don't own the covers. So I got some covers
Julie,
designed.
you dropped out for just a moment. Can you repeat?
Yes, I can.
You were
Sorry.
I've decided.
So I've decided to self-publish. So instead of going through another publisher, so I have had this covers designed for the two books, and I'm figuring that out. And I'm really excited about that. When I started wanting to get a book published 20 years ago, I think, a little bit longer than that, self-publishing wasn't a thing. Like, it wasn't, you didn't, people did it, but it was not, it was almost frowned upon, right? And now it's such an opportunity for people to really control what they want to do, get the work, the books of their heart out there, and especially for people who've written a few books, they're good books. So I'm very excited about figuring this out, and I know others have gone before me. And making sure that these books stay in print. And I think that's really the most wonderful part of it.
Yeah.
No.
So what else would you like your viewers to know about you?
Well, I love writing, and I am so grateful for my writing journey so far. And I love meeting readers, and I'm so appreciative of folks who read and support books. And I'm so appreciative of folks like you, Sarah, who help support authors in getting the work out there. And I consider myself one of the luckiest people. So I'm so grateful to be sitting here, you know, with my brand new baby and talking about it. And I truly appreciate the opportunity.
Well, we appreciate it too. What comes next for you?
So I have a couple of things. I did get 2 more books on this series. So, you know, hopefully there'll be more, but I'd never heard the words renewed before. So
we'll have 5 of Lily at least.
I'll have 5, which is thrilling. So I just turned in book 4. I'm promoting book 3, and I'm plotting book 5. So sometimes I'll have to sit here and think, okay, did that happen in Digging Up the Remains, or, you know, where am I with that? So I'm plotting book 5 right now, which is very exciting. And also working with my editor, he wanted cover ideas and things. So, you know, doing all that stuff. But I love plotting, and I'm a plotter. There's no one way to write a book, but I really think through the whole thing. So what I've got in my mind right now is Lily is in an old graveyard, and she's volunteered to help clear off some of the graves in early May for new plantings or to figure stuff out. And she's been in Goosebush so long, she noticed that some of the markers have been moved around. And so she's going to figure out what's going on. I somehow, like, a disreputable funeral parlor director has popped into my brain, but I don't know what's going to happen, but that's what I'm working with. And I've had a thriller that I've been working on for a few years, and I just really want to get it done. I don't have a contract, but it's a new genre for me. And it's in multiple points of view, and it's a thriller. I write very puzzle-driven mysteries. Like, I put the clues in, you can solve it, you know, at the end. And a thriller is a whole different thing, but I really want to try to pull this off. So I'm enjoying doing that as well. So that's where I am right now.
Let's have another look at the cover of Digging Up the Remains.
Digging Up the Remains.
Yeah.
My covers are lovely. I will say, I've got my other 2 here.
Oh, right.
That's Telling the Truth.
Uh-huh.
And then this is Pruning the Dead.
Oh,
And they're lovely. They're, hand painted and just, I love them. But yes, this is Digging Up the Remains. And I realized I've been writing this book and I didn't have a cat in it, didn't have an animal at all. So I added a cat, and you'll to the series.
Cats, cats are good.
Cats are really good, and they're just kind of part of the world. And I have two cats, so I mean, it's not like I don't understand what they bring to the world. So I've got I'm catching up because in the fourth book that I just turned in, I also added a second cat. So I'm adding pets.
Yeah. Zara and Robin, do you have some questions for Julie? Or a cat to show her?
I was here, I was listening. I completely missed the reading because I couldn't get back from Brunswick fast enough.
Well, you'll get a chance to catch up to it on the video.
I will, yeah. I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to it. It
Zara,
sounds terrific.
Zara got 2 cats yesterday.
Oh, really? And she has some to didn't she show us cats on?
Yes.
Sunday, but my daughter closed the door on me. So
Oh,
they're not in here with me. I can open the door and see if they'll come in. They've been using my leg as a climbing post to get to my lap. Not exactly the most comfortable feeling in the world.
You see, Julie, it looks like Zara is sitting out in her garden, but that's actually an artificial background. She's popped up
But
behind.
it is my garden a few months ago.
yeah.
And
Quite a
those
few
are the
months ago.
winter vegetables at the end. And we now have summer vegetables nearing their end. I'll have to take a new picture one of these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did have a comment about your reading. I kept on wanting to close my eyes because your descriptions were so good. I wanted to bring the pictures into my mind. I felt obligated to watch you read. So there was a tension between your reading and my wanting to close my eyes and really absorb your.
You really, really are a visual writer. And I could see that greenhouse, and I could see the seashell garden and the statues. And
Thank you. When my first draft is very dialogue heavy, and so I've got lots, and then the second draft, I sort of weave in description and things, and I just have such a sense of her house and the place. And as I said, it's a big rambling house, so I keep adding I keep adding rooms, and it's gigantic, but it's a lot of fun, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that very much. Yeah.
I'm always fond of books with big houses in them.
Yeah. There's just and these old New England towns, by the sea, there are always one or two ship captains' old houses that as his fortunes expanded, he made bigger. But that's, it's very traditional, or, happens a lot where somebody starts with a smaller house and they just keep adding on and figuring stuff out. So her house is definitely like that. There, it's not, it wasn't as grand as it ended up. But it's fun to imagine. And I did drive around Duxbury. So I lived there from when I was in first grade through 8th with my phone, just sort of like, where would she live? What would this be? And I knew where I was going all the time, which is kind of extraordinary. But I just looked to the left. I was right across from the shipyard, and I looked to the left, and there was this house up in the hill in the back. And I thought, oh, let me pull over, because that's her house. And so I don't know if you do this too, Sarah. I always, if I can, I try to find something that I can anchor myself in, or I can think about, or that just sort of gives me a sense of place that helps me build the world.
I frequently go online and find faces for my characters.
Yes.
Yes.
And
yes.
I always try to go where where I'm writing about, Connie Willis said that she had to do that. She absolutely had to do that because the first book she wrote was set around Gettysburg. And she went to Gettysburg thinking she knew everything about Gettysburg because she'd done a lot of research. And then she found these gravestones with nothing but a number on them. 2, 4, 5. And what it meant was that they had found 2 of something like skulls, or 4 of something, or 5 of something, could not figure out who these people were, and just put them under a single headstone.
Wow.
When I went to Arras to research a citizen of the country, I was remembering Connie Willis, and I went into a graveyard, and there was a stone. Arras was very badly shelled during World War I. There was a stone in the graveyard that said, "Here are the remains of 7 women from the Oud ladies' home, one of whom was Madame such and so." And you knew that the other 6 they couldn't identify.
Wow.
So yeah, you go to places and you discover your house.
Yeah. Yeah.
You discover the history of the town.
Or the town you want to create. When I was wrote my first series, it took place in the Berkshires. So I had a sort of an outline of what the series was going to be from the editor. But I just didn't know. And I went out to a wonderful theater company called Double Edge out in Ashfield. And when I was coming back, I mean, it's darker than dark out there. So I was trusting my GPS and had it going, and it had me take a different way home. And I was thinking about the series. I just signed the contract. It was exciting. And I'm just driving. All of a sudden, I drove into this small town. I looked around and said, "Oh, this is the town." Thank you, universe, because many of those mill towns have very similar buildings next to each other, and this town isn't quite in the Berkshires, but was from my point of view, and it had all these different architecture. It had this neon pink, diner over here, and it had this like fake Federalist style bank here, and it had a big rambling hardware store over here. And I thought, this is my town, because everything's different. And she was a clockmaker, so her house, she lived upstairs, and the clock shop, I just moved things around. But I find those kinds of things happen too. When I need to know something or I need inspiration, all of a sudden something will show up, or I'll read an article, or somebody will send me a picture. It's like, oh, I needed to know that.
Research angels, they come to you when you need them.
They do. It's magic. It's wonderful. It really
Yeah,
is.
writing is magic.
It really is. It really is. It's fun.
Sarah,
Yes.
look at yourself. You have a halo over your head.
Oh, that's actually,
I noticed the same thing.
yes, that's,
Definitely a halo. I just thought it was appropriate.
that's because I tilted the camera so you wouldn't see my clothes hanging up in the corner of the room.
So I did go looking for kittens, but what happens is they run like crazy for an hour, and they're perpetual motion machines for about an hour, and then they go whomp. And I think they went upstairs and are in the 3-hour nap right now.
And they're sleeping on the bed where they're not supposed to be.
They are supposed to be on the bed in this
Okay,
house.
good.
I've been sleeping with Irina, who is got my older daughter, who has the mess in her room. But eventually they may move in with me, since Harry, our elderly cat, seems to have accepted them as just another minor annoyance in his world.
Oh, that's great. That's great. kittens are fun, but they are a lot of work. I have friends who have been adopting kittens and 2 friends who adopted puppies, which are so much work. But
Mhm.
my 2 cats were rescues, and you know, they were found in an abandoned house and needed a home because they had FIV and they couldn't go to a shelter. So I took them in, and one of them was feral. And I thought, well, that's it. I mean, I've now signed, there were about 2 when I got them, and I thought, I've resigned myself to having a cat who's going to live under my bed for the next 18 years. And this is what my life is. And now, if I was sitting on my couch doing this Zoom, she would be sitting right next to me watching you all. She loves Zoom. She loves seeing people. And she has decided she's almost a lap cat, but she is just the sweetest thing. So I love cats, and I love the personalities and stuff, but I love that kitten stage. I mean, it is the pins and needles on your legs and all the rest of it, but they're so stinking cute.
But those cute little eyes
I
that look up
know.
at you. Oh.
I know, those little
They
fluffy
were
heads.
virtually twins. They're litter mates.
Mm.
Oh,
As
That's
best
great.
we can tell, because the fur on their stomach was shaved for spaying them. And maybe it'll grow back and they'll have white marks. They'll be different. But the rest of them is black, tending a little bit towards deep chocolate. And
Oh,
Nice.
they're virtually identical. So
Hmm.
we think maybe we finally have names, but they haven't been committed yet. One who went out and explored everything from the first minute seems to have decided to become Dora the Explorer. And
oh,
the other one, who we thought was very quiet until she finished her dose of medication, there's Harry, the big old cat. This morning, Electra seemed to stick to her because she's a live wire now that she's off the medication. So we'll see what happens, but
Great.
they're indistinguishable. And if I held one, you couldn't tell which one I had, except we have different colors on them.
Well, you have to remember is what color the color is named.
And actually, the one question I had was, which one gets the medicine?
I think if you write their names on their colored collars, it will help you.
And eventually they will turn out to be different people. Hello,
Oh,
Harry.
Look at
This is
Harry,
the old big cat.
sweetie.
Mm.
So
Cats are the best.
Cats are the best.
we now have black cats everywhere, which is the most dangerous kind of cat to have,
Why?
because you don't see them until you step on them.
Oh, and
At
also
night.
you're wearing a white shirt, which is now probably a.
No, it's not too bad. Lance Zen
Hair
does
shirt.
cat hair very nicely. I'll give them a promo.
Mm.
We have a dog and a cat who are both, well, it's it's a tabby cat and a brindle dog. And if you don't have something
Mm.
bright on them, they disappear in the woods completely.
Oh, I can imagine for sure.
Robin's up in Maine, so she has woods. Actually, I have woods. I can show you.
Oh, pretty.
Mm.
I have city.
Right out the window, I have woods.
If I had a camera and it was turned towards my garden, it would look a lot like that. But
Mm.
the picture's better.
One thing I do like about being up in Maine is that I have a nice view out the window,
Ah.
an inspiring view.
So this is your home in Maine,
This is our place in Maine, yeah.
and it's a cape.
It's a cape. It's a 2 up, 2 down. It is far, far from Lily's house. Because you can see that
To add a wing and
here is the entire, this is half of the top floor.
Lovely though. It's nice to have a place to get away to.
It is nice to have a place to get away to.
Yeah.
At this point, by the way, we have stopped being part of the official video unless you say something else that's wonderful and I'll cut it in.
Well, that's great.
But what happens is that I take the recording down and turn it into a video and probably end up the part where move the part where you were showing off your book at the end to the end, and then just put it up on YouTube and tell you about it.
It's fabulous. It's fabulous.
So Julie, tell me, what is a good book to start reading Julie Henry?
So for this series, I would start with Pruning the Dead. I mean, I write them. They can all be standalones, you know. So I do write it so that you'll still be able to read the other ones and you won't know the answer to what happened. I mean, I allude to things. But Pruning the Dead, I think, so that you can really meet Lily and sort of see her journey, is a good place to start. And these days, Kensington's been pretty good about putting ebooks on sale and helping promote series. So, you know, you can keep an eye out for that for sure.
I can't stand reading books online.
Are you a paper
I'm a
reader?
paper book person.
And I'm definitely an ebook person, so I'll be the person who.
I'm an
Look them up
ebook
online.
only on trips.
Hmm.
I have a Kindle app on my iPad because that's the only way I can carry enough reading material for a trip.
Huh.
But in real life, I like books.
I have two sisters, both of whom have kids, you know, lots of almost in college or in college, and also my parents. And so everyone's on my Kindle app because, you know, I buy books like when friends release a book, I'll download it to support them. And so they're all, I mean, I opened up my Kindle app yesterday and it said, congratulations, you know, you've read so many books in the last 30 days. And because I'm reading nonfiction and business books. I like to have the books so I can mark them up, and I've been reading business books. And I realized my sister Caroline's been going through and catching up on things. So I like them both, but if you could see, I have triple shelves of books. I mean, I have way too many books, and so I tend to go with e-reader. And the nice thing about with this book, they've also got it out on audiobook, which is nice. And Kensington's, this is the last month that they're going to be this size paperbacks. Sorry, they're going to an oversized, so it's going to be an inch longer and a little bit wider, so that the typesetting will have a little bit more space, which I also think will be nice. I've heard it's it's going to be $1 more, but it's for people who like to read books. It's going to be a more pleasant experience because these are, this is tight, like this is tight words. That's the other reason I like Kindles. I like making the words really big so that I can read at night and not strain as much.
Yep. My husband and I share a Kindle account, and he's always saying, "Oh, you should read this one," and I'm always saying, "You should read that one."
Yeah.
So it makes it nice.
It does make it nice.
Julie, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. For sure, it was nice to meet everybody.
It was a great reading. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I'm very excited about this book. So thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Well,